The plate slid across the polished wood, the ceramic clinking sharply against the table's surface. The sound was thin, brittle, and final. The sound of the plate sliding across the wood died away, leaving the room in a state of heightened, jagged tension. Elias kept his hands flat on the table, his knuckles white, his gaze locked on the empty space where his meal had been. He could hear the faint, rhythmic thumping of his own heart against his ribs. The air in the room felt thin, difficult to draw into his lungs. He shifted his posture, his spine rigid, and felt the sweat cooling on his neck. Sarah remained still, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her breathing barely audible. The silence was no longer heavy. It was sharp, waiting for the next disturbance. Elias cleared his throat, the sound harsh and dry in the quiet space. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers for the first time in hours. His jaw was set, his lips pressed into a thin, colorless line. He drew a long, shaky breath, the effort visible in the rise and fall of his shoulders. He leaned forward, the wood of the chair creaking under the shift in weight. "I do not think this is working," he said. The words were low, barely audible, yet they hung in the air with the weight of a physical blow. Sarah did not flinch. She did not reach for a tissue, nor did she look away to hide the onset of tears. She remained anchored to her chair, her posture upright, her hands resting motionless on the table. She leaned forward, the movement slow and deliberate, closing the small gap between them. Her gaze locked onto his, steady and unblinking. She began to trace the lines of his face with her eyes, starting from the hollows beneath his cheekbones to the deep creases fanning out from the corners of his eyes. Every line was a map of the years they had spent apart, and the months they had spent trying to bridge that distance. She studied the slight tremor in his jaw, and the way his brow remained furrowed, even now. It was a clinical, quiet observation, as if she were memorizing the geography of his exhaustion. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in as the seconds stretched. She did not offer a defense or a plea. She simply exhaled, a long, controlled release of breath. "I know," she whispered. The words were not a question, but a quiet, final confirmation of the truth they had both been carrying. The silence broke with the scrape of a chair against the floorboards. Elias stood, his movements mechanical, and walked toward the hallway closet. He pulled out a stack of flat, brown cardboard boxes. The sound of the tape dispenser ripping through the air was harsh, a jagged tear. He set a box on the kitchen table, the cardboard thudding against the wood. Sarah stood up as well. She did not linger at the table. She moved toward the bookshelf, her hands reaching for the volumes they had collected together. There was no hesitation in her stride. They worked in separate corners of the room, their movements synchronized by a sudden, desperate need for distance. Elias began clearing his desk, his fingers gripping the edges of his laptop and the scattered notebooks. He placed them into the box. Sarah knelt by the shelves, pulling books down one by one, stacking them in neat, rigid piles. The apartment began to feel hollow. They were no longer a couple in a home. They were two strangers dismantling a structure that had failed to hold them. The apartment became a landscape of cardboard and paper. They moved through the rooms with a focused, rhythmic efficiency that left no room for conversation. Elias stood at the bedroom dresser, his hands moving with practiced cold speed. He folded shirts and trousers, smoothing the fabric against his palms before placing them into his box. He did not look at the patterns or the textures. He simply processed the items as physical mass. Across the room, Sarah knelt before the nightstand, sorting through a collection of journals. She handled each item with the same detached care, sliding documents into folders and stacking them into neat vertical rows. There was no friction, no debate over who kept what. They operated like two surgeons working on the same patient, their movements precise and devoid of hesitation. When Elias reached for a shared stack of records, he paused, his fingers hovering over the spines. He did not look at her. He simply slid the records into his box, his movements steady.
If you made it this far, you already know the vibe. Hit that like button, subscribe for more, and don't miss what's coming next. New content, real stories, every week. See you in the next one.